What's up, everybody? Welcome to Deep in the Plus After Hours edition. Sorry for being a little bit late tonight. We had the premiere of Phantasmic on the other channel, and we wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to watch that. So now here we are tonight talking about, man, we're going to be talking about Zorro, and Zorro is of legend, right? So Zorro has been around forever, and I think the deep question for me here is, are we loving Zorro for the myth that he is, or are we loving Zorro for the content that they just dropped on Disney Plus? They just dropped the entire first and second season, which was 39 episodes of season 1, 39 episodes of season 2, a couple movies, but we're going to just focus tonight on season 1. And with me, I hope, I'm having trouble seeing him, but I hope is our good friend Charlie. Oh my
Oh, I'm
gosh.
here. I'm ready to go.
Oh, Lord and butter. Oh my gosh. I was not prepared for this at all. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So, Charlie, I have to ask you about your, I'm sorry, Zorro. I have to ask
hmm
you about your mania for this franchise because I had Katie who does news tonight reached out to me at one point. She was like, "Hey, you guys should do Zorro. It just dropped on Disney Plus." I'm like, "Okay,
hmm
well, I'll think about it." And you're like, "Dude, Zorro, we have to do this." What is your infatuation?
I've been a Zorro fanboy since I was a kid. My mom grew up watching this show, and it came out the year before she was born, but she caught it all in syndication. And then, so every chance she had, she grew up in the mania of the cowboys and all that kind of stuff. So I watched a lot of Lone Ranger, a lot of Zorro growing up, and like that's just what my mom did. And so I was like, oh, this is what adults do. That's cool. So I got way into Zorro. And then as I was growing up on Disney Channel at night, there was a collection called Vault Disney where they would pull things out of the vault and do like the true life adventure films and old episodes of World of Color and episodes of Zorro and Mouseketeers and all that. So like I fell in love with all of this like deep Disney stuff through watching Vault Disney, and my favorite one was Zorro because I remember watching it as a younger child, and as I was getting ready to have my son, and I was like, there's a lot, there's on Disney Plus, there's all kinds of stuff, but like, what's the one thing where I have to like go out of my way and buy the DVD set of, and it's Zorro. So he's now growing up watching Zorro and running around playing just the same way I did, and so having this come to Disney Plus is huge because I don't think I've ever seen, except for like twice a year when they would do marathons on Vault Disney, and like I would stay up as late as I could at like 10 and 12, which was like 11 o'clock. But I would watch as many episodes as I could back to back to get like the story all the way through. But I think for the most part, it's only been one-off episodes here and there that I've been watching for 30 something years. And so to see them all back to back, to see the whole story all at once is just, it's great. This is what I've been dreaming about since I was a kid. I'm beyond obsessed with this show.
Dude, I freaking love it, man. This is awesome because again, like I thought I saw Zorro and I think about black and white TV and these old time serials and I think, nobody's gonna want to watch that. Nobody's gonna be into that. So I love that there's kind of a passion that you have where you're tied to that. So much so that you would come on here dressed like that. Brava. Oh, so good. So,
And for everybody watching, I just want to say I was not dressed like this when we did the mic and camera test
no,
just a
you
few
would.
minutes ago.
No, you were
I
not.
did a Clark or Don Diego de la Vega quick change into my Zorro outfit, and as you can see, I made my own mask, so it's a little more Deadpool than Zorro because the eyes are a little off. But I'm
Dude,
very
that's so
pleased with
good.
it.
No, you got me for sure because I was like, I'm looking at my monitor. I'm like, well, he's not on. And I switched to you, and there you are in your full glory. So, man, thank you so much for bringing this 100%. When I talked to Charlie about this, I was like, hey, you're going to have to carry this conversation a little bit. Because, again, 39 episodes, I hadn't had the chance to kind of catch up to you and watch all 39 episodes, but I knew
hmm
of the basic myth of Zorro. But you were like, no, 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 we're going to talk about it for 4 hours. Well, we're not going to do that, especially not as late as it is. But I definitely want you to get in
Yeah.
everything you want. Shale in chat was talking about Zorro. There was an 80s film called Zorro the Gay Blade, and it had George Hamilton in it. And
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of did the franchise dirty a little bit because it was sort of a
hmm
comedy more than it was about Zorro. But I loved that movie as a kid, though. I really did. I liked that movie. So we'll talk about that one a little bit later. But right now we're talking about the original black and white serials and Guy Williams, who I think was kind of amazing in this. And again, if we go back and look at Disney Plus, and we can see, season one, season two, 39 episodes of each, black and white, the whole deal.
Yeah.
I look at this, and I was surprised at first that it wasn't already on Disney Plus. And then when I go
Yeah.
back in to look at it, I'm surprised at how well it holds up, because I feel like the story is well written. I think it's well paced. I think they do a great job of explaining everything to us without something I've been harping on a lot recently, which is, explaining in exposition. I think they do a great job explaining to the other characters why things work and why things don't. I was a
Hmm.
huge fan of the old black and white Superman in reruns, the George Reeves
Hmm.
Superman. My dad, though, kind of like your mom, was into the Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers and Zorro and the Swashbucklers, and these were the superheroes of that time, right?
Hmm. I mean, and this time, like, he is Batman. Like, the reason we have Batman is because of Zorro, even to the point where when Bruce Wayne's parents come out of the theater, they were watching The Mark of Zorro, the 1940 Tyrone Power one. It's like he really was more so than like Robin Hood, who kind of like gave up everything of his life to go be this outlaw. He Don Diego was more of like, I'm going to tailor my life and use my real name, my real personality as a mask to hide what I do at night, which is dress in all black, name myself after an animal, and hunt down bad guys. And having this from so these are all based on the original Johnston Macaulay stories from 1919. So this predates Batman. This predates all of that kind of stuff. Predates superheroes. But the idea of Don Diego behind everything really is a superhero mythos that everything else is built on from that point on. From Superman, using Clark Kent as a disguise. I mean, pretty much everybody but Iron Man, who kind of uses their real personality to dissuade others from believing they could be this superhero.
Yeah, and again, they kind of, over the first few episodes, they explain to us why this is going to work, right? He's sailing back from Spain. His father is from California, and California has not been colonized by the United States yet, and so it's kind of its own area. And he has reached back out to his son and said, "Hey, we need you to come back from Spain, where he's at school, because we want you to help us, because there's this comandante and he's a dictator and he's taken over, and we need your help." And so he's on his way back, and he's like, "Well, wait a minute. If I come back, and if I come back like a fighter, then they're going to just basically shut me down immediately. But if I come back and I say I'm into art and culture and books and music, and then that's my, like you said, your alternate persona, his Bruce Wayne, then
Hmm.
then they won't expect me to be this other swashbuckling, Zorro character." By the way, as long as I've known this story, and I've known about Zorro, and again, the Hamilton version and the Antonio Banderas version, I don't know that I ever knew that Zorro meant fox. I don't know why I didn't know that. I mean, I had no idea. It's in the freaking song, like, that they have
Yeah.
at the beginning. They talk about him being a fox, and he talks about that early on, like, I have to be sly like the fox, and then he's
Hmm.
like, "That's why I'm Zorro," and I just was like, "How?" I mean, they explain it. How did I miss that? I have no idea. But this is something you've always known.
I think it's also something that, like, you know, taking all these little bits, like he is Zorro, or the fox, all those kind of things. This is something that Johnston Macaulay, the original writer, published this story in 5 parts as a serial in All Story Weekly, and it became very popular and everything because literally the next year someone took it over to Douglas Fairbanks and was like, "This has a lot of stunts in it. You should do this." So he did. Like, Douglas Fairbanks could do anything he wanted to, and so he made The Mark of Zorro even before Johnston Macaulay had put all of his serialized stories into a single book. And so even going from, like, the first draft basically of like, here's the serials, then he got to work with it and retool it a little bit on the movie, and then he got to work with it and retool it some more in subsequent iterations of the legend, and then the Tyrone Power version in 1940. He consulted on this version as well in the 50s before his death. So he kind of tweaked it over and over again in the same way if you read like Lord of the Rings and then you watch the animated version and then you watch Peter Jackson's version, it's like, oh, well, this one has trimmed all the fat, all the plot lines are better because we've seen how everything is, and now we know exactly the changes we need to make it to streamline it and explain it clearly and everything based on audience reaction, based on more time to think it out. Like it's distilled down and down and down into that perfect version. And I think this one is the quintessential Zorro, even more than the Antonio Banderas one or the Tyrone Power one. Like this one is the real, the very last word in iterations of Zorro.
By the way, the mask, the outfit, and the silk hanging behind you has the chat wondering, where you really are. But I know you're at an undisclosed place because you have a secret identity.
Actually, fun fact: I'm about 30 seconds from Zorro's cave. They would film. I live just north of LA, but it's still within the zone, which is like 35 miles outside of the city center. So when they're running through the countryside and everything and running around the rocks and all that, that's anywhere between Pasadena and Vasquez Rocks, and I'm up here closer to the Santa Clarita area. So Melody Ranch, where they filmed a lot of the great westerns, is 30 seconds down the road from my house. So I'm actually really close to where Zorro actually ran around.
Well, I'm jealous of that, dude, because I love movies, I love TV, I love going to places where they've made movies and TV. I got to tell you, though, man, you have really lit up the chat. Rosita, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosita.
Given us a super chat for $20, and I think it's all you, dude.
Thank you very much.
She was ready to, this was going to be late tonight. She was ready to pack it in, and I think, you came to play, buddy. So
this is it.
Rosita,
I've been waiting for this.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate it, Rosita. So again, the whole Bruce Wayne thing of it, they go really in depth on that and explain it to us. Like I said, as he's explaining it to his manservant, I guess we'll call him Bernardo, which is just really his friend Bernardo who helps him, but he's there to do whatever he needs. Bernardo is mute, but then he's like, okay, I've got a plan. You'll also be pretending to be deaf, so that people will say things around you that you can be my eyes and ears. And I think, okay, that's pretty smart. And then he's like, and I have all these trophies and things. I want you to throw them off the boat, and let's pretend like they never happened. That says, what a great fighter I am, or how great I am as a sword with a sword. And so he throws all that away because he's going to commit fully already to this idea. And then when he gets back into his room, he's like, back once he's gotten to California, he's gotten back to his dad's house, and he goes, hey, here are these secret entrances that basically it's like the Batcave, dude. It's like, here are these secret entrances, and here's this horse that no one knows about, and here's all these things, and this is why I'm able to pull this off. But he's explaining it to Bernardo instead of explaining it to us, which I love that.
And it's their rapport and their chemistry is so good, where it never feels like too much exposition all at once. Like they're just conversational about everything, and even not conversational because he can't speak, but like his miming movements and everything is just as good as if he was saying the lines. And they have such a great chemistry together. As I was doing research for this, I found a lot of their little interactions like that were either completely ad-libbed or just ran away from them, and they were just having fun and going through things. They just work so well together.
Well, Gene Sheldon, again, very much was known for these kind of roles, but he was in Babes in Toyland with the guy that played Garcia, and they were
Henry Calvin,
right? But he was also, I think, mute in that as well. So, but I think that's really kind of more of a vaudeville thing, like the whole, I mean, just like the pantomime, so to speak. That made it. It's like, oh, are you? Yes, I'm going to be Zorro tonight. I mean, those little things, and I think he just does an amazing job of that, and is so lovable, really, as his friend, his sidekick, and his partner in all of this. I love the bit where he's like, "Hey, I'm going to have you be cover for me. I need you to learn how to play the guitar like I do, so that you can make that when people walk by, they'll hear the guitar and they'll think I'm in here, and it'll really be you." So just like, again, little touches like that they're explaining of how you can get away with this. Because if you think about it logically, Zorro's never been here. Don Diego's coming back and he comes at the same time Zorro does, it seems like a
Hmm.
little too obvious that that's the case. And they sort of allude to that in, I think it's like the second or third episode where they have the mask and the Commandante has, like, brought the mask to Don Diego and is like, hey, I think I know who Zorro is, and he's like, oh, okay. And the way that they end it like a serial every week with the whole tune in next week, it really reminded me of the Great
Yeah.
Movie Ride. It's like, tune in next week. Will this happen? Will this happen? In Busby
Yeah.
Berkeley's Footlight Parade. They were talk about the kind of this lead up or this build up as to what the next episode was going to be, and at the end of that first episode or the second episode with the Commandante coming up with a mask, you're like, uh oh, he's already been found out. But then he kind of makes fun of the fact, well, it can't be you because the guy's about my height, and he's like, well, I'm your height. And he's like, yeah, but look at you. He's like, well, let's see how you can fight. And then he's like, with the sword. So I
Yeah.
mean, it seems
And
too
that
obvious,
just
but then again, they cover the tracks.
that goes to show also what an amazing actor and swordsman Guy Williams is, that he is able to do impressions of people sword fighting. Like he does an impression of, and he does this several times as Don Diego, not only as like as a bad swordsman, but then he's going to fight as Captain Monasterio, or he fights in the same way that the other characters in the show do. And when he needs to go and show like what someone who doesn't know how to fence but still needs to win the fight, like he needs to make it look like an accident, and he has this fight on top of some rocks, taking down some bad guy, but like he's in clear view of Captain Monasterio, so he's like swinging the sword around like a helicopter and stuff, and still getting what he wants, but he makes it look entirely like luck. He is just such an amazing fencer, and also the lead swordsman they had on the series was like a legend of Hollywood, and he taught everybody from Tyrone Power, the original or the 1940s Zorro, and Errol Flynn for the Robin Hood and Captain Blood and all that kind of stuff. Like if anybody had a sword in their hand, he was the one to teach them. And Fred Caveras or something. And so he was on the series. I keep wanting to say film. He was on the series week to week, showing them all this, and then he had to teach not only Guy Williams, but also the Zorro stunt double is Buddy Van Horn. So if you see somebody like Guy Williams did a lot of stunts, but Buddy Van Horn did the really crazy, dangerous stuff. And then also Gene Sheldon and all the soldiers and everything. Like he had so much work to do, and was able to get everybody on that show just so laser focused and so good. It's incredible. And I don't think even with weeks and weeks of rehearsal like we have now, leading up to a major show or something, just with the production schedules we have now, I don't think you have anything like this again. This was a perfect moment in history where you could do something like this.
Yeah. And again, the I feel like the cinematography of this is good. I feel like the fight sequences are good. I feel like the reasoning and like when they put things together, the storyline seems to be pretty tight. Like it surprises me how well it's done, because I don't think you had to do a lot of that. I feel like with the Superman, there was a serialized Superman before the George Reed one where he would just come in and punch and stand there like with his hands on his hips, and it just wasn't well written, but didn't really necessarily have to be because it was Superman. This seems it's smart the way it's written, and the way they cover all the bases, and they don't insult
Yeah.
the audience, and then again, the fact that it holds up. The only thing that doesn't hold up for me, and you could tell me if you agree with this or not, Guy Williams is not Hispanic. Guy Williams was Italian. And he does not,
Yes.
but he was born in the U.S., but he does a horrible job, I feel like, of holding the accent. Sometimes he's good, but then there'll be a whole like a couple of paragraphs where he's just not even bothering.
That was something that they worked on kind of back and forth, and it did, especially in the beginning of the show before he really got his hands around the character. You didn't want to go too far with it because it would sound caricaturish. You didn't want to scale it back too much because then it's not Spanish enough for Spanish California. So he kind of played with it, and in the early stages of the season, you can kind of feel the transition of where things change a little bit. Walt was very involved in all of this, and like he spared no expense on this series, and he did it as though they were doing a movie because he understood movies, and so you just do it that way, and that's why the production values are so incredibly high. Um, so he would come and like, one monologue to the next, he'd be like, "Oh, a little bit more accent," and then he'd go too far and be like, "All right, let's back it off just a little bit," and just kind of give hand signals in the background to the other actors to see how far they want to take it, until he stopped with the hand signals because he kind of got it right. And that's, you kind of feel where like, okay, now they really got it and they're in the swing of things. And so I think that it evens out after a while. But the accent being as it is, I still think he's just the most charming, most attractive most attractive person who's ever walked the earth. He's so good that it weighs in favor to, like, if he makes, if he messes up the accent now and again, like, he's still just so charming that he can smile once and you'll just forget everything and he's perfect again.
Sir, have you not seen Josh Tomorrow? What do you mean the most beautiful man that's walked the face of the earth?
If there's anyone who can hold up against Josh Tomorrow, it's Guy Williams.
Guy Williams.
Yeah, but specifically Guy Williams as Zorro with the little mustache, because like once he loses the mustache over in like Lost in Space, not quite as much. He's getting a little bit older. He's not, like this is perfect.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you on that one. But here's the thing about the mustache too: is the mustache has got to be an identifier of him when he's Zorro and Don Diego, because it's just so perfectly the same, and that's not something, as is evident by your mustache, is not something that covers up when you're wearing the mask.
No,
By the way, did you pattern your mustache after Guy Williams? I'm now putting that together, that perhaps maybe that you have such a man crush on Guy Williams that you're looking.
It's definitely part of it, like Errol Flynn, Robin Hood, and Guy Williams, and then even to an extent, like Tony Stark does the same kind of thing. It's all the same thing. And my dad has this same look, so he has a little bit more, connecting it through as a goatee as Tony Stark. But yeah, basically, ever since I was a kid, I always kind of knew it was going to be like a Robin Hood thing, and I grew it in my early 20s, and I haven't changed it since. I haven't shaved it off at all.
All right, so let me go back and ask you a different question that does, as we're kind of hyping up this series and Zorro in general and the lore, is this has just come to Disney Plus. Do you think the reason it didn't come to Disney Plus sooner had to do with the content? Is it
No.
too politically incorrect? Is it culturally insensitive?
No, I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of questionable material that's out there, like even beyond, the Song of the South, even beyond that kind of thing. There's a lot of outdated cultural stuff, and I think with this, it's close enough. I don't think that's really a driver. I just feel like people don't care about it as much. So it was kind of in like the second or third run of like releases. I'm surprised they didn't publicize it more. It just kind of showed up one day and I was very happy about it. But like I was really expecting kind of like, hey, we're digging in the vault and we're going to open the vault again, because there's a lot, like I don't think Blackbeard's Ghost is on there yet. Like there's a lot of older stuff that I would expect to see, Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, like some of the stuff they did for TV, the True Life Adventure films. I would expect there to be a little more pomp and circumstance about bringing it out, but they just kind of dropped it. So I'm a little surprised that it happened that way, and that doesn't really explain why they didn't put it on in the first place. It should have been out with the first drop of content. So I don't know. I do know that a new series is in development. So then when I had heard that they aren't doing anything with it, I was like, oh, well, they're just going to save it for that and drum up support and see how it goes for the new series. So, hopefully.
So I've heard Wilder Valderrama was in for Zorro, which seems a little weird because he's definitely fit, but I feel like Zorro is taller. I don't know. He just seems like he's bigger than
Yeah,
life, and I'm not sure that Wilmer Valderrama is that guy. But I do. I mean,
yeah.
I could see a little bit of like kind of the good looks coming off of him, and it would be a little bit more. I don't know. I can see it, but I feel like there's got to be somebody else out there.
For years I've been saying Diego Luna, and when he walked out to announce Andor, I was like, "Here we go, this is it. Diego Luna is going to be Zorro." Oh my god! And then he did Andor, and he does a great job in Andor, and like I really like him. I would really like to see him in like a gritty, realistic reboot. And I think if you do it the right way, it's a good story for this time of this person who speaks up for the oppressed and the downtrodden and everything. It's the Robin Hood story. It's always a good time, and it always fits. But I think if you do it with our current cultural lens in mind, it can be particularly poignant. And I think you need someone who has really good acting chops for that. I just don't know that I've seen anything from Wilder Valderrama that, like I think I've only ever seen him as Fez. So like I don't really know what else he's
Handy
done, and
Manny,
that's on
dude.
me for not knowing. Yeah, I haven't seen Handy Manny, but I'm sure there's some really deep monologues there.
There is. But they, but you know what? As we're talking about this, I mean, Zorro again has a huge legacy from the original stories to the comic books to the serials, and I mean serials is in the movie theater, not the ones like that you eat.
Mhm.
But I'm sure at some point somewhere there's been a Zorro serial, maybe I don't know.
I'm
But
sure there is.
it's definitely been one of those things that's been in the culture, but so has the Lone Ranger. And as we've seen, the Lone Ranger has been a hard thing to reboot. There was that Chad Michael Murray TV show that didn't work, and there was the
Yeah,
Johnny Depp movie, which I liked, but I don't feel
I
like most
loved
people
it.
did. Um,
Yeah,
so I was disappointed when it didn't go beyond that, that when it wasn't a huge
yeah,
hit,
me too.
because I do feel like the Lone Ranger is that kind of character too, just like we're talking about with Robin Hood and Zorro, and I feel like that maybe there could be that it's the time for a new Zorro. I don't know, but I really kind of get that vibe when I'm watching this show. Is like you just said, even through today's lens, this could be something big.
hmm I think I
So
think it's time. It's time for a really good one. And realistic, like the way they've been remaking a lot of the old westerns that were kind of goofy and over the top, and they made like 310 to Yuma and True Grit and like not so much Magnificent Seven, but like some of the ones that come out to be really serious and realistic in their tone, and I think that's what Zorro should be.
so let me ask you this, from a standpoint of you're a super fan. I mean,
Mhm.
if people didn't know it before, they know it now with your
Yes.
outfit and the whole deal. You're a super fan. Do you feel like that the series is the place to start? Because with this series, again, there's a season one and a season two, and it's 39 episodes. That's a big commitment to do because they're like 30
Yes.
minutes each. Do you start there, or is there a movie you think that would be better to start with? Or, like, if you
No.
wanted to get somebody started down the road with Zorro, where would you guide them?
Um, I would say this series, the beginning of season one, the first 13 episodes are the first story. They kind of break out season one into, I would say, maybe three definite chunks, but like two stories. So the first 13 episodes is the quintessential Zorro. And like when you think about Zorro, it's him going up against the bad guy, Comandante of Los Angeles, and in this one, Monasterio. And after 13 episodes, that's also what they made the movie of, is those 13 episodes condensed down into I think like an hour and 20 minutes or something. So if you really want to give it a shot, watch the series, the first 13 episodes. If you don't have quite that much time, you can watch The Sign of Zorro, which is the movie, also available on Disney Plus. That's the same story but just condensed considerably. um, but I feel like if you watch the first 13 episodes, you're going to be chomping at the bit for the next adventure where he goes up against the Eagle, and that's really good too. It's a little more drawn out. It's not quite so compact in its storytelling, but the stunts just go crazy. And like the first one is like the solid story that you're really after. The second adventure with the Eagle, starting episode 14 to 39, you get some really intense action and horseplay, and the sword fighting is just, it gets so much more intense. Like That's the one where they're like, okay, now we know we can do this. Let's really run. And so I think after you watch those first 13 episodes, if you can make the commitment to that, um, to get through those first 13, I think you'll want to go further. If you want to do the movie, that's fine. It gives you the same idea, but it's also kind of, then you get the idea and you don't have to go back to, you can just jump in at episode 14. So one or the other. Um, I'm
Gotcha.
seeing people mention the Antonio Banderas movie as well. That one's good too, but it's not quite as good, I think, as some of these more romantic Zorros, like the Douglas Fairbanks one or Tyrone Power. Those are both, like, Douglas Fairbanks is an incredible acrobat, so he jumps a lot and swings a lot, and the stunts are great. I just don't particularly care for him. Tyrone Power is a little more charismatic, but he's not quite as good at the stunts. This one blends the two perfectly, so I think this is the best place to start.
Let's go back into the series here and talk about the stunts, because there was one stunt that I thought was very unique. There was a whip fight on horses.
Oh yeah,
That was
yeah,
was I couldn't tell whether that was cool or ridiculous. But
yes,
basically, Zorro and the Commandante are swinging whips at each other and going in circles. And it's like, I'm whipping you. No, I'm whipping you. And it's just like they go
yeah,
in circles, and it finally ends up where he wraps him up and pushes him away in the whip. But again, back to what we were talking about earlier with the Zorro the Gay Blade, the whip becomes a big part of that TV or that movie.
hmm,
Because he decides to use the whip instead of a sword. But I think to the character, it kind of speaks to that whole Batman thing again, the utility belt. He has so many things in his arsenal. He's got his wits, he's got his money, he's got his swords, he's got his whips. The just and the one the other episode that I thought was interesting was the one where he fights or where he uses the ghost of the mission. So
oh
again, he's kind
yeah,
of like, this is where he's become clever, and he's outsmarting them as well. So you can just see that he's really kind of like got the whole package going on.
yeah. I think the Ghost of the Mission is probably my favorite episode. I want to say from the series, because it's like self-contained. It's a little goofy. It's comedic. Henry Calvin, who plays Sergeant Garcia, it just, like, no one does a reaction like him. His reaction shots of, like, shaking and all that, like, it's just so good, and it plays into the comedy side and the ridiculousness of this. Like, you can't do a show like this without a little bit of tongue in cheek, and so this kind of gets into it a little bit more. And I think, like you said, using his wits to outsmart them, and, like, that's his real weapon. Even though, yes, his sword, but, like, using his wits is always what it is. He's maybe not the world's greatest detective, but he's close.
So let's talk about Sergeant Garcia for a second, which, by the way, again, sort of matches with you as we move in and out of this. Just
Hmm.
his overall look. But so Sergeant Garcia is the Commandante's like right hand man, which I feel like there's a little bit of a flaw in this, in the fact that the Commandante is such he's such a perfectionist sort of, and he asks so much, and this is kind of a buffoon. I mean, he's the comic
Yeah.
relief. He stumbles, he falls, he stammers, he gets caught by Zorro constantly. Um, so it's interesting to me that this would be his number two guy. Um, but the other thing about him, I don't know if you ever watched a TV show called Hogan's Heroes, but Hogan's Heroes was about a POW camp, and there was a Sergeant Schultz in
Hmm.
in that that's like exactly like Sergeant Garcia. It's the same thing where they always use him to play on the colonel, and they always pull the wool over his eyes, and they always get him involved in the capers and go behind his back, and
Hmm.
he's kind of a heavy set, bumbling, you know, wants to do good but keeps kind of doing wrong kind of a guy. But I think this character is brilliantly played, but he is
Yeah.
kind of played as the fool.
Yeah, and I think he has to be, like, um, it's difficult to have a character who is the number two of the bad guys, but also sympathetic and a good guy. Like, And this is something that they deal with immediately after that first run of 13 episodes when the bad guy Monasterio is taken out by the Viceroy. Garcia becomes the acting comandante, and Zorro or Don Diego says, with him there, he's a good man, and I don't think we'll need Zorro again, because if he's the comandante, he's not going to oppress people. He's a good guy, and they deal with that a lot in the second adventure with the Eagle. Is he is a good guy, and like he's following orders, but he's doing it under duress a lot of times, and he does. He's the butt of a lot of the jokes for his size and his idiocy and all these different things, but it also gives something for, if you're right there and Zorro's going to stop and rear his horse and wave and everything, like, of course, a competent soldier is going to get him. And so they put Henry Calvin there to take the abuse from Comandante so that he can be like, you buffoon, you go get him right now. And then give Zorro a chance to escape. So it works on a story level, it works on a like comic relief level, and it also makes him a more interesting character that we want to keep in the show for both seasons at 39 episodes apiece. You want him to be part of it. You want him to be part of the overall cast, and he also has such great chemistry with everybody. It works so well. He's just such a jovial guy. You can never be upset, even when he's like trying to arrest Zorro. He's always going to fall down and be befuddled and stuff.
And you see that when you go to the scene with the Padre. Like, he has such respect for the church. And again, in those first 13 episodes, the storyline is basically there's a man who has sought refuge from the church, and the Commandante is after him, and so they find out that he's there, and it's this whole how do we get him out. And there's a place where they're like, hey, we've come up with a reason we need to siege the church, so we know we can't bring the guy out, but we know we can go in there and keep an eye on him. And as he's about to go in, he kind of apologizes to the Padre and takes his hat off and just understands like the reverence of the church. And at that point, again, you're right, you're seeing like the good side of the bad guy. Like he's not an intentional bad guy, he's just there with the bad guy.
Yeah.
So.
And, it makes it interesting for such a long show as this. It's a very long show. But, you do want to see him week to week, and he's not played out. He's not one of the faceless guards. And like, as we transition bad guys, you don't want to transition away from Sergeant Garcia.
And as this show goes, I mean, we're talking about 39 episodes. By the way, I Patrick had me looking deeper into Disney Plus than I ever had before, and we were going in and looking at some of these international shows that are out there that had 3 seasons, and each of them are like 80 episodes, and they're like 1-hour shows. And I'm like, yeah, we're never doing those, buddy. But when we go and look at this one, 39 episodes seems like a lot, but it's they're about 24 minutes each, and so they're easy to digest, and they don't stand alone because, like you said, it's kind of serialized. Those first 13 episodes are telling a story. You kind of have to watch all those together, but you can probably watch that and then take a break and come back and watch something else, and you're probably binging other things anyway. But those 24 minutes go pretty quickly because you've got 46 seconds of the intro song, which you're going to want to enjoy at least a few times. And
Every
then
time.
And then that bit at the, of course, sorry, I apologize, Senior Zorro. But at the very end, when they have that, that tune in next week kind of a thing, you can sort of gloss over that and go to the next one.
Yeah.
I do think it has some cinematic value in the way they present it that I appreciate when I'm going back and looking at it. But I do think they're it's easy enough to go through. You don't have to look at it as a daunting 39 episodes for season 1.
Yeah.
You can break it down in 13 like you were talking about, but also they can go in smaller chunks.
Yeah, and it's also, it's an adventure show. Like, it's not, like, if you're watching House of the Dragon and it gets really intense and you're like, I just need a break. Like, I just saw so much terrible. I just need a break from stuff for a while. Like, you never walk away from this thinking I had less than a spectacular time. Like, it's always a fun, adventure-y show. And, like, they're dealing with some real stuff. It's not no stakes or anything. It's not like The Simpsons or whatever, but it's light and fun and adventuresome, and like, no matter what they say of like, can he make it? Like, Zorro's always going to make it. That's why his name is on the show. like, it's always going to work out for in Zorro's favor, in the end of the adventure. So it's just lighthearted and fun, and it's great to watch the stunts and go on an adventure.
Yeah. Let's backtrack a second and talk about the theme song because Rosita said, "Get that theme song in your head." It get like so. The theme song, it's one of those things. I was talking to my father-in-law tonight. I was telling him that we were doing Zorro. He's like, "Zorro, I haven't thought of Zorro in forever." And I said something about, do you know what Zorro stands for? Like what it means? And he said he didn't know. And I said, it's in the song. He's like, I forget the song. And so I played the song. He's like, oh my gosh, I remember the song. So it's one of those that's so well known. And it's like, out of the night when the full moon is bright comes a horseman known as Zorro. The bold renegade carves a Z with his blade, a Z that stands for Zorro. But then in the in the chorus, it says, the fox so cunning and free. And I'm like, how did I not put that together at some point? And this song was written by the director, Norman Foster, and George Bruns together. And George Bruns has done an incredible catalog of music that he put together. And I thought I saw some reference somewhere that the Sherman Brothers were involved with it. And then I was like, that doesn't seem right. I feel like I would have known that if that was a thing. But the fact that Norman Foster, who again was the director, was involved with the actual making of the song is pretty great.
Yeah. And it was a lot of the same people who worked with the Davy Crockett stuff. So like the Mellowmen sang that song, they sang this song. When they had Zorro come to Disneyland and stuff, like Guy Williams was a singer, and so he could sing the song in the same way. Fess Parker and Buddy Ebsen would sing the Davy Crockett song. Like, it was all around the same time. But the music is a huge part of this, the show, and part of what led to, they had a huge budget week to week, just disgustingly huge. And part of it was they had each episode, 39 episodes in each season, every single one was scored, which was rare for the time. They would use a lot of canned music. They would use, the theme intro, and then it would fade off as they walk in, for any other show. But this one, they scored every single one for the action scenes, for Bernardo, the little flute thing they do. Every single one had 10 to 15 minutes out of the 24 minutes was scored, and they recorded it on the stage, and they were on a 5-day production schedule for each episode. So they were writing the music, scoring it, shooting it all at once, all on the Disney studio lot. So it really is a big part of what this is, the character of Zorro.
Well, and to that point, maybe that's the difference, is that there was care taken in making this show. Whether it was Walt's fingerprints on it, or it was the music, or the budget, whatever it was, there was care taken in making this show. Like if you're a fan of Scrubs, I'm a fan of Scrubs, the TV show. You watch the ones that they came back with after they like tried to bring it back and cut the budget. You're like, what is this? What are they doing? Because in the early days, tight comedy, that kind of thing. In the later days, you're like, why did you even bother doing this? This looks like the kind of thing that they were like, we are all in on this. We have, this is something that we are wanting to bring to the big screen or the little screen, and it really is well done. So this was 1957 through 59, I believe, was this series. Then in 1992, Charlie, they colorized it. Why would they do that, Charlie? Let me just show this little clip of a side by side that I found online. So they colorized it. I don't think it needed to be colorized.
I don't think so either.
I feel like that kind of takes away from it, right?
It does. It's like when you shoot as a cinematographer, when you expose for black and white, you're using the shadows on purpose. Like, if you don't have the shadows, like Michael Curtiz would not have a job. Like, that's when you shoot in black and white, you shoot in black and white, and you should leave it that way. It doesn't look the same in color. It doesn't look good in color because the contrast, the color balance, the richness of the blacks, and like how you compose the frame is going to be different with black and white than it is with color. So colorizing it, I think we were going through at that time a cultural thing of like, hey, look at what we can do now with computers or whatever. Like, we can pull things out, and 4 years after that was the Star Wars re-release, and it, like, with the ring around the Death Star, it just we got taken away as a culture for a little while, and I think it's finally stopped in the last like 5 to 10 years, where it's like we used to have re-released on Blu-ray for the first time now with eyelids, and like now we kind of like it's going to be on streaming. Just give me the original one. Just leave it alone. I'm just happy to have it, And I think that was a moment that we were having that we should not have had.
Well, and you're right. That's a great thing that they decided to release it in its original form. It's the original aspect. It hasn't been cut for 16:9. It's original, the aspect ratio, original black and white. I'm looking in the chat, and Dawn says, "I hate colorizing." Joe says, "Oh, that looks bad. It makes it look less focused and sharp." Just because it can be doesn't mean that they can do it doesn't mean they should, said Dawn. But that takes me back to the whole thing about the fact that I think with my kids as they were growing up, if you were to turn on anything that was black and white, they're like, I gotta go, or let me pick up the iPad or whatever. It's just like they're done. And so I think that there is something still artistic about the original black and whites, whether it's photographs, and I know you're a big photographer, but photographs or movies or TV shows, there's something very just kind of authentic about a black and white thing, and I think sometimes we dismiss it because, again, I think some of it was garbage, but this was not. This was well put together, and so I think that you just throw it all in the bucket of, oh, it's black and white, it's old, it's probably going to be slow, it's probably not going to be well written, it's going to be whatever. But I feel like you didn't need to colorize this.
Yeah, it needs to be in black and white. I mean, the attention to detail, like I when I was a kid, we went to this thing where some of the people who worked in the early Disney studios were talking about it, and they said they spent almost $10,000 on that cape in R&D and production, because you need to have a guy wearing a black mask and a black cape and a black hat riding a horse at night. How are you going to see that? Like, how is his cape going to be flourishing and stuff? So they needed to get just the right material, just the right shape, so that it could fly but not get in his way when he's running around. You want it to be just shiny enough but not look like latex. Like, that cape is a perfect piece of material for black and white, so that no matter where he is, no matter what he's doing, you still see the flourish of Zorro's cape. It, the way you want to see of a character like this, you want to see him spin the cape and run out the door, and you want that black cape to register in black and white. So they did that specifically for black and white. And the reason the show came to an end was because Disney wanted to colorize it and ABC wasn't ready to do it. And so it kind of ended. So to now go back and colorize all this is like, yeah, maybe that's what Disney wanted all along. But like, anytime you try to put color with this, just don't. Just like, learn your lesson once. It brought the most popular show on television to an end because you tried to colorize it. You would think you'd leave well enough alone. But, They made 6 Jurassic Park films, so who knows?
I do think there were some shows in this era that went from black and white to color, and it didn't really. It felt like it
doesn't work.
The color was cheap. It felt cheap, as opposed to the original, because it feels authentic. When we were talking, you and I and Cam did a review of Werewolf by Night, which was shot in black and white, and the care that they took with the blood to make the blood, obviously look like blood when it's in black and white was also another one of those things. And the fact that it was shot in black and white in the first place puts it in a different time period, puts you in a different perspective, because when you watch that, you think, oh, this is the 50s, or this is, the 40s, and they really kind of throw you with it being in black and white, even though, there's accents in red as it goes through. But that's all part of the process. If you go back and you colorize that, which was shot in black and white on purpose, it wouldn't be the same thing. It would be ridiculous. So there is usually a purpose. I mean, I know they didn't have the resources necessarily, but some things they did have the resources to do color, and when they did, it just didn't. I don't think it translated as well. So I thought it was
it's better.
Talking about.
It's better as black and white, I think.
Let's talk about the fact that he went to the trouble to have 2 horses. I mean, I got to imagine that at the time it was probably not easy for a person to have 1 horse, much less to have 2, and one that he keeps like on the side. So Tornado, the horses are a big deal to me, man. Like the Lone Ranger and Silver and Tonto and Scout and I don't know. Mulan and Khan. Like, I mean, it's just like horses are a big thing to me. And so the fact, like Tornado, that was one of those things where I had forgotten specifically about Tornado until he like brings him back, and it's this beautiful black horse, which again in the black and white is just so strong, and he
Yeah.
shimmers really, and it's one of those things that like I see it and I'm like, man, that was so cool because he's got this purposeful back cave that purposefully goes back to a hidden area where his horse can run, and he talks about that. He says, Bernardo, this is where Tornado will run and and get his exercise, and this
Hmm.
will be the secret way that we get in and out. And he's got like this like he's gone to the trouble to put like basically a fence there to keep him in, but he doesn't have him like in a like a stall or a
In a
paddock
pen.
really.
Yeah.
And so it's just like Tornado. I saw him, and that was as exciting to me as seeing Zorro, man.
It's and he's one of the performers as well. Like he does stunts and everything. He performs like quietly walking up and stuff. He's a character just as much as Zorro or anybody else.
Katie is correcting me, Tornado.
Tornado. Well, at that point, we have to start pronouncing everything with a Spanish accent, and I don't think I have the energy for that.
I don't have the energy. My dad explained it to me as tornado, and I think maybe that was again the thing is I'm a little kid and he's trying to get me to watch this thing with
Yeah,
him because he loved it so much, and it's like, hey, look, animal, like, look,
yeah.
look, it's Scout. You love Scout. Watch this with me. Um, so I don't know. I love the myth of the black stallion and and the rearing up on the back on his back legs and
Hmm.
the theme song and the swashbuckling and the whole deal with Zorro. So, dude, I
And
get it,
that
but I love that you love it so much.
Oh, I love it so much. I'm been driving my wife crazy recently because of all this. And like, we did Halloween and she wanted to dress as the Sleepy Hollow characters. And like we did, and that's fine. But then my Zorro costume arrives in the mail and she's like, "What is it? What are we doing? Why is this?" And I'm like, you know what? It's just going to happen. I've got something like I know Halloween is important, but this is just as important. So I'm really glad that I got to do this because she's been watching Zorro with me off and on and listening to the books in the car and like the radio dramas and everything. So I've gotten way into it ever since it got released on Disney Plus.
Radio dramas, that's another thing, dude. There were so many strong radio dramas, and again, my dad, who grew up in the 30s, and like loved to like you see it in A Christmas Story and some of these old like these movies that go back to those time periods, and how
Hmm.
important the radio was, whether it was Little Orphan Annie or The Shadow or the
Yeah.
Green Hornet or the Lone Ranger or all of these characters that I mean it's just so much that they can go back to and bring to life. And then the question is it was it better to have it just the theater of the mind on radio, or is it something that can translate well when you bring it to life for the next generation? So yeah, the radio serials, that's great. Now, just please, for because I've never met your wife, and I don't want her to hate me when
Hmm.
I finally do meet her. You were doing all this before you suggested we do Zorro, right?
Oh yeah, I got as soon as they dropped it on Disney Plus, I went all in,
Okay.
and
I just want to
I
make sure it's not my fault
no
that you did this for the
no this
show.
is you're just part of the obsession. Everyone is here tonight to feed my obsession that was already going, and
We're
this is
just giving you
just
a
convenient
platform.
that we happen to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. It wasn't convenient, dude. You were like, dude, has anybody claimed Zorro? I want Zorro. Let's do Zorro. And I was like, I don't know. Will people watch Zorro? I mean, that's one of the
Yes.
things. So,
Yes, they
you're
should.
like,
They should
yes.
watch Zorro, read The Curse of Capistrano, watch the movies. Of course, the Antonio Banderas one. You know, the other ones are worth watching. They're just a little tougher to get through. Um,
But I mean, for,
but
for somebody like you that loves this IP, I assume that anytime they bring up another option or like another iteration, you're going to be down for it because not only do
yeah,
you get to see a new telling of it, but you get to celebrate that like it's that the entire catalog comes back.
yeah. Every time I find a new iteration, it's not a whole lot of like, hey, we're making a new iteration. It's more like, oh, I haven't seen this one, so I'll watch that now. But like, I hadn't seen the Douglas Fairbanks one until doing research for this, and I hadn't seen the Tyrone Power one since I was a kid. So like, getting to relive all this and seeing them all back to back is like there are some that are better than others, and this it's kind of like Doctor Who. Like if you really fall in love with the series at during the Tom Baker years, like you're probably not going to go back to like the Richard Pertwee stuff. Like it's just too different, and we've changed too much since then. Same thing with like the David Tennant years now. It's a different show. So it's the same with Zorro. Like whichever one you fall in love with, you're like, that's what I'm after. And so there are aspects of the other ones that you still like, but I don't think I don't think has been or ever will be as good as this version of Zorro. This is the best one because this is what I grew up watching.
Not this one.
Okay, so I've never actually seen this one all the way
What?
through. I know. So it's not available on streaming. I was trying to watch it for this. Someone gave me the DVD because you love Zorro, and so I tried watching it when I was a teenager, and I got into it, and I'm like, this is goofy and dumb. Like I want to watch Zorro. Come on, and this isn't Zorro, and so I turned it off, and I ended up watching like Robin Hood or something because like I wanted an adventure movie, So I turned it off. I don't know what happened to the DVD, but now I can't find it on streaming. I looked for it, like I'll rent it from Vudu or something. It's not available.
I
don't know.
I wonder if again it goes back to it being somewhat insensitive because it's Zorro the Gay Blade and it plays into stereotypes and things like that.
For that one particularly, yeah.
But I think that the overall, if I'm remembering it correctly, and again I know a lot of people who were in the chat were talking about this one early on, and I felt like we kind of had to talk about it. It was Lauren Hutton, George Hamilton, Brenda Vaccaro, and it was I think the 80s, but it was Zorro the Gay Blade is what it was called. And the basic gist was I think that it was Don Diego's son that maybe is become Zorro, but he has a twin brother who basically joined the army and became like an admiral or something like that. And so the twin has not been around, and he breaks his leg, and there needs to be a Zorro, and so they bring the brother back, and because he's like, this is not how I do things, and he's going to be a little bit more of a flamboyant version of Zorro because he's like, I have to be who I am, which to that point I think maybe it does have a place today, but I haven't seen it in forever, and I wasn't looking at it through the 2022 lens, as we called it.
Yeah.
So it may be horrible, and maybe that's why you can't find it on streaming, but for $12 you can buy it from Amazon and they'll ship it to your house and you can watch it, but it doesn't sound like something you want to contribute to because you feel like it's not like the original Zorro. But that's what I'm saying is like, even with that telling of it, it brings back thoughts of the original Zorro. I remember seeing it. I think probably my dad took me to see it, probably thinking, oh, this is actually going to be really good, probably looking for, like you were, looking for that adventure. That it is an adventure movie, and I do think it does have a good story, but it is definitely more of a comedy, kind of like what was it, Casino Royale, the original, with the Woody Allen version of James Bond?
The comedy version of the Ian Fleming novel.
Right, it was that kind of a thing. So it's like it's still James Bond, but it's not. I think that's the same thing with this one. It's like it's still Zorro, but it's not. So I mean, again, I'd like to go back and look at it myself, but I would probably just watch it by myself because I wouldn't want to go to anybody and go, hey, you should watch this with me. I remember it being great. I would want to go back and see it. But I just remember enjoying it as a little kid and thinking, oh, well, at least it's Zorro. But I guess, again, to a true fan like you, maybe you're like, no.
But I'm willing to watch it. It's like, even if it's a weird, different version, I think if I go into it like knowing that it's going to be goofy and go into it to accept that, I think I'll probably enjoy it. But like someone said, hey, you love Zorro, and so I had literally just watched the Mask of Zorro or the Mark of Zorro, whichever one, the Antonio Banderas one, and I was like, I'm gonna watch this one next, here we go. And it was totally different. And so I turned it off like 15 minutes in because I was like, this isn't what I'm here for. And so I ended up watching something that was a little more in my taste for that night. But like, if I know about it going in, then it should be fine.
Well, and the fact that he was like, again, the brother was like, look, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it on my terms. I'm going to do it with style and flair. I'm going to use a whip instead of a sword. But I'm still fighting the fight. I'm still the Robin Hood, rob from the rich, give to the poor, save the downtrodden. And so I do think that maybe there's a lesson there. But again, I could be wrong, and I could be looking through rose-colored glasses and go back and watch it and go, ooh, this hurts. So at some point, maybe I'll have to go back and see that. But like you said, sometimes those things aren't on streaming. Sometimes there's a reason. When you talked about that at the top of the show about when we were asking about why wasn't this on, why did it take so long for this to drop, and why was it so unceremonious? I was at a stockholders meeting with Chapek and Iger in 2020, in March of 2020, and there was Disney Plus had dropped the November of 2019, and the stockholders were saying, hey, I thought everything in the Disney catalog was going to be on Disney Plus. You guys have this insane amount of content, whether it's ABC or TV shows that were like The Wonderful World of Disney, or specials, or parades, or all these other things. And Bob Iger said at the time, some of the stuff was not in good enough shape to put on Disney Plus. And I look back at the Mouseketeers Go to Walt Disney World. That was a train wreck, and they put it on. So I mean, it includes the commercials. Allison and I did a Deep in the Plus on that one. It was kind of funny. It seems super inappropriate. There's just a lot of weird things about that one, and it's like, if you're putting that on there, you should put the Twilight Zone or the Tower of Terror, the Steve Guttenberg one.
Yes.
That's not on there. Like, it should be on
Really?
there. I feel like everything should. Yeah. I would have loved to have done that for Halloween, but it hasn't been on since it started. And some things like Maleficent, I get that they may come and go because they have other contracts available, but that they had made deals years in advance with Netflix or HBO or someone else to have it. But it seems to me that with Disney Plus, they should have everything that has ever been. I want the hotel channel that they have. I want every Welcome to Walt Disney World video that there ever was on those channels available.
Yeah.
Like, you've got all this content somewhere. And then when you go into some of the stuff like the later movies that we've talked about, a lot of them don't even carry the DVD features that were on the DVD. It's like, again, you have this content. You should put that out there for us. Maybe they just don't need to. But I just it's Disney Plus. Plus it out for us. Give us everything. End of rant.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense as to why they don't have all of that. I mean, even the like this, or like some of the other vintage stuff where it's like, I don't want to say it this way, but your window for putting this stuff up and reaching the original audience is closing. You're not, if you wait another 15 years, somebody who saw some of these things, some of the shorts from the 40s and 50s, you're probably not going to have them interested in watching it if they're even still around to watch it. So put up the old stuff first so that we can get several years of enjoyment out of it before, eventually, hopefully in a far distant future, my mom will pass, and I don't want to then have her favorite show drop the next day.
Right.
I want it to be available for her now.
No, that's valid. That's very valid. Dawn had said in chat, unrelated to what you just said, I apologize, but she said
That's all right.
that George Hamilton had a very spoofy personality, like with Love at First Bite. I forgot about Love at First Bite, which was
Love at
again,
First
a
Bite,
spoof
yeah.
on a vampire movie, and I think was also Lauren Hutton. Interesting that they would both have been in both of those movies. I think it was her in both. But anyway, it really is, as Chelsea said, dang, Charlie went morbid.
Went morbid, yeah.
But I mean, it's true though. It's true. You're talking about there's an audience for this that brought. I mean, there's different levels of that nostalgia too. When it first hit, there were a lot of people like, dang, DuckTales original is on here. The entire Disney Afternoon is on here. That generation was hit with hey, here's some stuff. Now it's like, here comes Bear in the Big Blue House. It's like that was okay. That was when my kids were growing up. That's what we were watching, was Bear in the Big Blue House, and all that stuff you had. Why didn't you drop it all at once? It's not like Netflix where you're paying to have this content on your platform. You own all this stuff. You own it already. Why are you waiting to bring it on unless you're trying to entice us? But you should be trying to entice us with the new original content you're doing. I watched Pinocchio this past weekend, That's a completely
Yeah.
different story. But I mean, you should be trying to entice us with Werewolf by Night and She-Hulk
Yeah.
and Andor and all of these things, and just give us everything that you have, and then entice us with the new stuff that you're doing, Disenchanted and the Santa Clauses and all the stuff that you're adding after the fact. So.
Or even if you do want to entice us with this, do a little bit of marketing, let us do a big promotion that, hey, Zorro is coming to Disney Plus. You could do like a teaser with just a Z and see who gets it. Let the internet talk about it.
Well, I got your
I mean, we'll
spokesperson
write about
right
it on the
here.
website.
Here's
Yeah,
your
like
spokesperson.
just let me do it. I'll just hype it up. Just like send me out to Hollywood and Highland and I'll just hand out flyers to people. Like, I don't care. Just, I want something out there that make a big deal about it, because there are still, even though I didn't get to see it in the original run, there are still people like me who are super fans of every single thing they put up. There's somebody out there who's like absolutely head over heels in love with Darby O'Gill and the Little People and is like ready to lay down their life for that movie, and you need to do that fan justice. So that's,
Again,
I wish they would do a little bit more.
Tower of Terror. That's one that I'm just
Tower
like,
of Terror.
I have it on
Yeah.
DVD, but don't make me go grab a DVD, find a working DVD player, and put it in. I mean,
Yeah,
I
come
should
on.
be
What
able
is this,
to watch it.
1999?
I know, right? I should be able
Get
to
out of
watch it
here.
with the touch of a button at any time, and it would be great.
Yeah.
Charlie, I know originally you said you wanted to spend 4 hours talking about this. We've kind of already gone over, and we kept these folks up late. So, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we go into the final round here?
Uh, I encourage everybody to go back to the source material with this. Read Curse of Capistrano. It was published as a book as The Mark of Zorro. It's a little more like, it's the same basic story, but just a little more gritty, and like it's called The Mark of Zorro because he carves a Z into bad guys' faces. So like it gets a little real. It gets a little more intense. So I would suggest reading it because it really is just a great book. The audio book is really good. Hearing the different voices to differentiate between everybody really brings it to life. And then just watch the show. Like it's daunting looking at 39 episodes, but like I said, 13. Just commit to 13, and I think you will be very grateful that you have watched it at the end of that.
All right, so we're going to go into I'm going to ask you the big question in a minute and get your final take on this. But before we do, I kind of want to hype up next week's show, because next week we're going to be talking about this movie, Escape to Witch Mountain. It's something that people have talked about before. I mean, there were several movies, as you can see: Return to Witch Mountain, Race to Witch Mountain, which was the Rock reboot. But to me, this one is a classic Disney movie. And what I'm most excited about is our friend Katie has arranged for us to be able to talk to the original Tony. Ike Eisenman will be on.
Cool.
This guy right here, the man, will
That's
be
awesome.
on. I'm so excited to be able to talk to him. So it'll be me, Patrick, Ike will be talking about Escape to Witch Mountain with somebody who was on Witch Mountain. So please tune in next
That's
week.
awesome.
Tell your friends, wake the babies, call the dogs, let everybody know that this is happening next week. We're really excited about it. So again, a special thank you to Katie for making that happen. But now, here's the moment, my friend. And also, by the way, if you haven't hit like, please hit like. And also know that I didn't come up with trivia for this one, A, because it was 39 episodes, and B, that Charlie would have slayed the whole thing.
Yes.
So there was no purpose
Yes, I would.
in even trying, and I knew that from the beginning. So anyway, please like the video. Please make sure to share it with anybody, because Charlie went to such great lengths for the entertainment value, or maybe it was just his own personal entertainment. I don't know.
I was going to do this whether I was on the show tonight or not. This is just how I exist all the time.
Perfect. So now is the time, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise, but here is the question, my friend. Would you, we're talking about season 1 of Zorro, would you recommend this series?
Yes, I would recommend this series.
Dumbest
I would
question.
recommend every episode of this series. If you can find on YouTube or something, the little stunt show that the Zorro cast did at Disneyland in the 50s, that's fun to watch. Like, there's nothing that this group of people did in relation to Zorro that is not spectacular. Every single bit of it. And I usually try to temper Like, I don't want to oversell something, because then you walk in and you're like, oh, this is going to be great. And then you walk in and you're like, it was fine. This one I can't oversell. It's just fun. It's just good, clean fun done by an amazing group of people who put on a once in a lifetime type of show. And now, thanks to the miracle of technology, we get to experience it more than 50 or like 60 years afterwards. Like, that's just incredible. How lucky are we that we get to take part in this? So I highly recommend this and anything related with this show. And I really hope the reboot is going to be as good.
All right, so I agree with you. I would recommend this, and the funny thing is I wasn't necessarily looking forward to it for the reasons we talked about. Like, is this going to be something that has not stood the test of time? Is the black and white thing, is it going to be too slow, too sleepy? I enjoyed going back to this material. I really did, and I realized that I didn't know as much or remember as much about it as I thought I did. So I would absolutely take your recommendation of at least jump in and watch these first 13 episodes, because it's kind of the origin here, and it talks about all of the things that, you know, I get going deeper in the source material. If you get hooked on the series, go back and watch that source material. But for this, I feel like it's such a great introduction to Zorro, you know, to really kind of feel what the character was like. And I love the idea that there may be a continuation of this story. Like I said, this lives in myth in my head with the, you know, with the Green Hornet, with the Shadow, with the Phantom, Lee Falk's the Phantom, and also the Lone Ranger, you know, Robin Hood, all of these stories, and Zorro's there, and it's an amazing tale, and I would absolutely recommend it. Again, it's going to be a little daunting because of how many there are, and because it is in black and white, but I would just encourage you, just watch a few episodes and kind of get a feel for it, because I think you'll enjoy the ride. You know, once we do, then everybody will start cutting holes into black sheets and putting them around their face, and growing the pencil thin mustache and the whole bit. You know, they're gonna go, thank you, Charlie. You really introduced me to something amazing here. And it's, in a
You're
way,
welcome.
it's Disney lore, because like this is like something that Walt put his hands on, and the idea
Yeah.
that this was something that was so important to him, makes it, I think, even a little bit more special to people like us that are also Disney fans. So, Charlie, thanks again for bringing this up,
Thank you for having me.
for coming in hot. Uh, and you know, we've got a lot more coming up. You know, as we move into the holidays here, there's a lot more stuff coming up. So we hope you'll join us every week for Deep in the Plus. Thank you guys so much for being here. Don, Chief, Joe, Ronald, just looking through the chat, Rosita, Shale, thank you guys so much for being with us in chat, for watching, for having the conversations with us. And don't forget, Escape to Witch Mountain next week. You're going to want to be here. Thanks again. We will see you next time.